A lot of the conversation around a peer-to-peer transaction is happening in messaging apps or social media. And so we thought, wait, what if payments could just be initiated directly in that application, right? Making a payment becomes as easy as sending a message. Stablecoins are super fragmented.
Different stablecoins, different networks.
How do you easily transact between them? We're going to need some infrastructure that can facilitate someone holding USDC very easily sending funds to someone who wants to hold USDT or USD1 or whatnot. And that's really what educated the thinking behind what we've launched now and called PayID, which is this first universal stablecoin ID.
How does AI fit into all that now? Because you already teased the topic a bit earlier.
AI is really interesting to me because
today's episode is sponsored by the Stellar Development Foundation and Flipside Crypto. They've partnered up to bring a series of Flipside quests to the Stellar network. Quests are a fun, gamified way to explore Stellar and to dive into its growing DeFi ecosystem. By completing quests, you can earn rewards and, of course, bragging rights with your on-chain activity score. Getting started is easy. Just grab a Stellar wallet like Freighter or Hana and click the link in the description to jump into your first quest. All right, Adrien, welcome to the Teach Me DeFi podcast.
Hey, Sohejl, great to be here.
Lovely to have you here. I'm kind of excited to chat about topics we got on the agenda today, because sometimes when I'm doing these shows, it can get very infra heavy and kind of like abstract tech and how the decentralized network works and how it's secure, what trade-offs are made and stuff. And I feel like sometimes some audience members you lose that way a bit. So today I feel like we'll also have more connection to utility users and some concrete use cases that they can see what it looks like to use your application and so on. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. For those who work in the industry, we tend to be very deep into the tech, and the reality is this tech needs to be usable, right? And so being able to provide a good user experience and products that like feel very simple to use, I think is key, and definitely something we focus on a lot at Reveel.
Yeah, I love that. It is sort of like what's still missing, right? It's still too clunky and hard to use these primitives and interact with chains. Like I've said that a couple of times on the show already as well. Countless times where I was like, okay, I want to do this one thing, like I have this thing I want to do on chain, get that done, I've allocated some time, and then it just ends up being like 3 hours or something because something's buggy, something's not working. Some transaction doesn't go through. I need to update the Ledger app. So whatever it is, it just takes time. I mean, if it takes so much time for me as a crypto native, it is impossible for most people.
For sure. And so much progress has been made, right, over the last couple of years. Like it used to be even worse. So I think we're definitely moving in the right direction. But there's still a lot that we can do. At least when it comes to the payment space, that is really what we're focusing on. It's like, how do we make an on-chain payment experience as smooth as possible, and really so that it can compete with the user experience that we're used to in Web 2, types of payments products. So yeah, excited to dig in with you on that.
Yeah, the payment space is really exciting at the moment. We've had some episodes now on stablecoins and RWA. And I mean, you had these big announcements from Stripe, really embracing stablecoins and on-chain infra. They bought Bridge, which was, I think, a $1 billion plus acquisition.
Yeah, 1.1 billion. Definitely a pivotal moment, I think, in the stablecoin space. Prior to that, we had already seen, Visa, MasterCard, Engage, and Stripe for that matter, we're doing some, had some initiatives in the space, but I think it really has unlocked a lot for several reasons. The first is that it has shown, sort of a traditional financial institutions that there is real value there, having that sort of size acquisition. It has showed VCs and all the investors that there is a real opportunity to create return. And obviously for founders, it's been also a big unlock in terms of like seeing those opportunities and realizing that the bigger payments companies are really ready to engage. And since then, it's been like a myriad of partnerships that have been announced left and right with TradFi and sort of crypto native payments companies. A lot happening around like cards, crypto based cards. So it's definitely an exciting time for stablecoins.
Yeah, for sure. But tell me a bit about, because you started with creator tooling, I think, and I find that space interesting as well, around like how artists can monetize more sustainably and things like that. And you ended up in the end now building like a universal stablecoin infrastructure. Just what has been your journey like, and what problem did you see then early that others missed, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, the journey of building a company is really one of learning, right? And trying things out. You iterate, you learn, you adapt. And so we started Reveel with a focus indeed on like creator financial tools. And the first product we went to market with was a revenue share protocol. And the goal was really like, how do we automate what can be very time consuming for creators, which is like, oh, I just made, whatever, $1,000, but I owe, this partner half of the revenue, whether it's royalties or not. And then I need to pay my manager 15%, right? And like, so all of these transactions and sort of financial accounting that just takes a whole lot of time for creators. So we thought, like blockchain is a perfect technology for this. You can literally create smart contracts that hold all that revenue share logic. And so we built this protocol, which allowed creators to like very easily deploy their own revenue share contracts with exactly the rules and agreements that they have with different partners. One of the learnings through that, actually two main learnings. One was that creators were receiving revenue, on-chain revenue, from a lot of different sources on a lot of different networks in a lot of different tokens, right? So a very fragmented sort of income, reaching them. So that was the first learning. And the second learning was that the big companies didn't feel comfortable yet processing payouts on chain. And the main reason for this was that stablecoins weren't established, and using non-stable tokens just created too much risk. And so for those reasons, there was a lot of pushback in terms of adopting this type of innovation. And so based on those two things, we realized there were some really interesting opportunities. The first was we built an application that allowed a user to sort of hold, revenue on different networks and in different tokens, even in different wallets, but have that sort of into a single view and source of truth in terms of where they could see all that. And then very easily on top of that, make one-off payments to a freelancer they had worked with, and so that was the very beginning sort of our experience in the peer-to-peer payment space, facilitating those transactions. And we realized that users were often like swapping and bridging funds before doing a transaction. And so to make this super easy to understand for everyone, you might receive revenue in one single stable coin, which is USDC, but then you want to pay someone and they're like, no, I want to receive USDT on the BNB chain. And so what you have to do is like go through this process of like converting those USDC tokens into USDT tokens on the right network before you can do that transaction. And once we identified that as a problem, we thought this was massive because stablecoins are super fragmented, right? Like they're I think now it's like 250 stablecoins that are listed on DeFi Llama. And USDT and USDC cover the vast majority of transactions and that market cap. But nevertheless, fragmentation is becoming even worse as more and more new entrants come into this space. And on top of all these different stablecoins, they're obviously deployed on dozens and dozens of networks. And so that just, multiplies the issue of fragmentation. So we thought that assuming we move towards a world where stablecoins become the primary method of payment, we're going to need some infrastructure that can facilitate someone holding USDC very easily sending funds to someone who wants to hold PYUSD or USDT or USD1 or whatnot, right? And that's really what educated, sort of the thinking behind what we've launched now and call PayID, which is this first universal stablecoin ID.
Super interesting. Is that what you think is also kind of still holding back stablecoin adoption? Like, what is it? Is it the fragmentation? Is it probably many things? But I feel like that's one of the things, right? Different stablecoins, different networks. It's just exponential complexity.
There are a bunch of things. Today, most of the stablecoin transactions are considered or called what's a stablecoin sandwich, right? And so this is the idea that you start in a fiat currency like US dollar, you bring those dollars on chain into a stablecoin like USDC, and then you do the transaction to the recipient, and then the recipient sort of automatically receives pesos as those stablecoins are off-brand to another fiat currency. So that's the stablecoin sandwich, and a lot of transactions, sort of follow that route today. We are starting to see more and more recipients, especially in emerging countries, who want to hold stablecoins. And this has been known also as sort of the dollarization of emerging economies. And it's this whole idea that for them, it's way better to hold US dollars than their local currency because inflation rates might be super high in their local currency. And so by holding dollar, they actually are able to preserve value, right? And so in emerging countries, we're already seeing this, where like transactions don't need to be off-ramped, or at least not immediately, and balances remain in stablecoins. But we believe that that's going to go even further as more and more financial institutions, fintechs launch their stablecoins. They're going to want to incentivize, consumers to hold those stablecoins so they can generate some yield on top of them. And so then the question is, when Bank of America has their stablecoin and Citi and JP Morgan launch their stablecoin and Revolut does, and obviously PayPal already has, and Stripe does it with Bridge, right? Like so many different stablecoins within all these organizations. How do you easily transact between them, right? In the Web 2 world in the US, there's something called Zelle, and that's basically like an embedded peer-to-peer payment solution that's integrated into the big banks. But in the Web3 world, there really isn't anything yet. And so that's really what we're building with Reveel and with PayID. It's this embedded universal payment infrastructure that allows you to do direct peer-to-peer transactions, regardless of what stablecoin a transaction might be starting or ending in.
Right. How do you go about this? I assume there has to be some unified source of truth then, where you kind of keep records. So how does this PayID actually work behind the scenes? Tell me about it.
Yeah, we have really two core layers, if you will, to our infrastructure. One is a data layer, and it allows us to identify the recipient and know what they want to receive. And then the second, below that, is an orchestration layer, which allows us to find the optimal route for a specific pair that's being transacted and make sure that we can deliver that transaction at the lowest cost. And so we connect to a variety of different liquidity partners on the back end in order to execute that. But the flow is really pretty simple. When I want to do a PayID transaction, I'm going to search for your PayID. I'm going to tag you, and then I'm going to send you, whatever I have. And maybe that's, let's say, USDT on BNB, we're going to look at you, the recipient, and your preferences. Let's say you want to receive USDC on base. And then based on that information, we're going to design what that route needs to be, ping the different liquidity partners, identify the optimal route, and send the funds through that specific route and through that specific liquidity partner in order to deliver to you, the USDC on base. And so that means that, wallet information, chain information, even stablecoin information is fully abstracted to the user. And they can focus on what's important, which is literally who is the recipient, how much am I sending, done. And so that's really how our infrastructure is designed on the back end.
Yeah, this user experience is really powerful, I think, to, like you said, just choose the recipient, choose the amount. That's what people are used to. That's what they, at the end of the day, want to do. It doesn't matter if it's crypto or something else underneath it.
Exactly. I think in my mind, you can't force adoption just because the underlying technology might be more efficient. Like if you're not providing at least a similar or on par user experience, you're going to see massive resistance. And so sort of UX is very much at the core of how we think at Reveel and sort of what we prioritize. And I think that, in my mind, that is what will unlock mass adoption of a variety of different types of crypto products. But when it comes to payments and stablecoins, I think that is particularly true.
Right. And does this work with intent? So what does that look like? Because you have people, like you said, your liquidity partners that execute, I guess, on the routing. Maybe you can give it a bit more color how that goes.
Yeah, I think part of the complexity in what we're building is the ability to cover for a lot of different stablecoins on a lot of different networks. And so what we've had to put in place is really a solution that can plug in to a lot of different types of liquidity partners. Because if you're doing let's say USDC on base to USDC on Optimism, probably using Circle's CCTP is going to be the optimal way to deliver that transaction. But if you're doing a more obscure pair, maybe USD1 to USDM, right? That's going to be a lot more complicated. Liquidity becomes an issue. And so we have to be able to tap into different types of partners. And that might be a bridge aggregator, that might be an intense protocol, or it might be layer 0, or it might be CCTP, right? It really depends on the specific stable coins involved in the transaction. So the approach that we've taken is, in order to have that coverage, we need to be very modular in our technology and what we can plug into our orchestration layer to ensure that we can, execute on those transactions. So there isn't necessarily one answer to your question. It really varies.
Yeah. Do you have do you leverage other kind of like cross-chain infra, like for example XLR, to do like programmatic cross-chain stuff?
Yeah, we don't have XLR yet in the infrastructure. The first, I guess, proper interop protocol that we're integrating is layer 0. And then we have a bunch of different types of partners. I mean, from sort of like just a bridge aggregator to a market maker that might be providing liquidity. And perhaps one point I should emphasize is part of the reason for having different types of partners as well is to be able to have some degree of redundancy for specific pairs. Especially when you start to talk about bigger type of transactions, maybe B2B transactions. There is an element of security and certainty that needs to be delivered as a payment sort of provider. And having redundancy in terms of the different routes that we can offer for a specific pair becomes quite important. So, we often talk about payments in a sort of broad stroke, but the reality is there are very specific payments use cases, and they require sometimes different infrastructure, or at least different value proposition on the back end in terms of what that infrastructure can provide.
Makes sense. What's sort of like the custody chain of these actions? Like, is the user first holding his balance in his own wallet, and then he's depositing it in a smart contract wallet, and from there the rest is routed? Like, how does that flow? Even though there might be individual differences based on the pair, but
Well, the first point is Reveel itself and our infrastructure is fully non-custodial. So we're never in possession of the funds, and that's not really what we're trying to do. So the funds flow directly from the user's wallet into whatever routing solution or partner we've identified as being optimal, and then are delivered into the recipient's wallet. And Reveel, obviously prepares the transaction metadata based on the data that we have, identifies the right partner to send the funds to, and then takes care of the messaging between the parties. But we don't hold the funds ourselves. And we think this is really powerful because it allows us to be integrated into a lot of different types of solutions, and still sort of maintain this ethos of decentralized and non-custodial capabilities that Web3 and blockchain offers, which we think are really interesting propositions when you're trying to change the way a financial system works. So yeah, a fully non-custodial solution.
right. And where do you keep these mappings then? Like, this user likes this stablecoin, and like, do you also have your own chain or something like that, or how?
No, that's a good question. Today, that is still centralized. I think it's A16Z that has sort of spoken about a framework of progressive decentralization. But we definitely follow that sort of thought process. I think as a startup, you need to be able to move really quickly, iterate. It's quite hard to do that if you're building on chain from the get go. It's a lot harder to change what is already deployed on chain, and so being able to start with a fairly centralized solution, at least when it comes to just the data, allows us to iterate a lot more quickly. And once we feel like that infrastructure is in place, we can start to decentralize that, put that data on chain, and offer a solution that's even more decentralized, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But how does AI fit into all that now? Because you already teased the topic a bit earlier. I think you mentioned it was something agentic, and it was to kind of simplify how the user can now send stables, I think. So I'm just curious.
Yeah. So maybe before I even go into what we're building, I think that AI is really interesting to me because I see it as a shift in terms of user interface and user experience. Um, Not unlike the creation of web as a new UI and interface, and then from web to mobile, and now from mobile to AI, right? And so what's really cool is that each time we have these big shifts in terms of how people engage with technology, there is a lot of disruption that comes into place. And so PayPal started with the web, Venmo started with mobile. And we think there are going to be a lot of new entrants that start with an AI native peer-to-peer payment solution. And so because that's our thinking, we've gone ahead and built our own AI native payment agent, if you will, which is live right now and integrated into Twitter as the first sort of messaging and social media platform that users can engage with the agent with. And so that obviously uses our stablecoin infrastructure on the back end, but it simplifies the experience even more because you don't necessarily need to be in a wallet in order to initiate the transaction. Now you can just remain in your messaging app or in your social media app, or eventually we hope in like the game you're playing or whatnot, and initiate the transactions directly there. So for us, it serves multiple purposes. The first is the ability to like really embed peer-to-peer payments into social media, messaging, etc. And then the second is sort of bringing that agentic or agent first type of user interface. So the agent is called REVA AI, and it's been live now for just a few weeks, but the traction has been amazing. And we're super excited about sort of how peer-to-peer payments are going to shift with the arrival of AI as a new interface.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's been referenced a few times. I think Outlier Ventures actually formed a whole thesis around. Oh, you guys also they're investors of you, right?
Yeah. We are an Outlier Ventures portfolio company, and so I often have conversations with Jamie about sort of how he's thinking about the space, and he's got a very strong thesis around the agentic economy, which I fully agree on, and they have released some really cool content and reports around sort of how they're thinking about the post web is what they call it. And no, we are fully aligned on those thoughts.
Yeah. No, I think that's interesting. That possibly user interfaces could be generated on the fly for a problem that you have that you want to solve, custom made for you. It feels definitely like a paradigm shift if we get there. In some ways, you already see that you prefer to just ask ChatGPT for certain research and look up things than to go to Google. Even when you do it on Google, you now tend to get also the AI response,
like Gemini's response.
Yeah, sometimes that's more useful, I find recently. But then I think there still is also the raw utility of I want to look something up, like for example, that is quicker, like on a map or something. Like I think this will still be there, but there'll be some sort of marriage as well between these two.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And when we look at payments specifically, because that's obviously where we put most of our efforts when we're looking at how this technology is evolving, we see that a lot of the conversation around a peer-to-peer transaction is happening in messaging apps or social media, right? Like you'll remind your friend, hey, you owe me $20 for dinner. And so we thought, wait, what if payments could just be initiated directly in that application, right? Why would the user have to leave that app and then open, whatever application, peer-to-peer payments app, and then do the transaction there? Can we just help users save a bit more time and make it even easier for them? And so that's been the thinking behind it. And it's live on Twitter now, so you can just literally just tweet at the agent and it'll initiate a transaction. So we think that's part of the future in my mind of like AI native types of payments, which means it's really embedded. It's going to live where you engage as a user, right? That might be gaming, streaming, etc.
Yeah, but how does it work then? Like, you have to make a deposit first or not? Like, which money is the agent sending?
So you can go to the revapay.ai website. You create an account that automatically creates a PayID for you. So this universal payment stablecoin ID that we've built. And today it's an alpha, so early version. So we've decided to make it a standalone wallet. just so you don't connect a wallet that has all of your money. And so you can test it out with a standalone wallet. You just put some funds into that wallet, and then the agent has the ability to initiate a transaction from that wallet. And so you connect your Twitter account to your PayID, and so when you tweet, it recognizes that you have a PayID and that is your wallet. You can do a transaction from there, and you can tag the recipient. If they have a PayID, then the agent recognizes, oh, that Twitter account is tied to a PayID. That PayID wants funds to arrive here, so it executes the transaction. And if the recipient does not have a PayID, then the agent actually reaches out to the recipient and says, hey, Sohejl, you've got Adrien is trying to send you funds, like create an account so you can get paid. So it's a very sort of like obviously social first, but very viral sort of payments mechanism, which we think is quite fun.
Yeah. Where is the private key stores that the agent has access to sign these transactions?
Yeah, we've collaborated with Privy on the back end. So they they offer some really great tools in terms of like server wallets and all the key management associated to it. They're a fantastic sort of embedded wallet solution. So really glad to partner with them on that front.
Okay, interesting. Haven't heard about them yet. I know Lit Protocol. We're partnered with them on a separate venture I work with, Oda AI. We're partnered with them, and they do sort of secure decentralized key storage for use cases like agents. So they stored you have threshold encryption, and they're stored like pieces of the key are stored on different trusted execution environments, so like secure elements on a chip.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think just around that use case, right? Of like, how do you enable an agent to get access to your money, right? And in a way that's secure, that has the guardrails necessary, etc. That alone is a problem that I think is going to prompt a lot of innovation. And in sort of Web2 payments, we're seeing that a lot, right? With Stripe and some other players who are Visa, etc., who are looking at like, how do you spin up sort of a one-time use credit card that an agent can use, and stuff like that, to really put those guardrails around, right, and make sure that an agent is not going to drain your entire account.
Yeah, it's funny. You look at every step in these tech stacks, and you'll for sure find some problems that you can solve.
Always.
Yeah, probably be a good opportunity, and value will accrue to the person solving the problem well. But you mentioned X, and we actually set it up earlier. Do you want to showcase it a bit?
Yeah, happy to. So I'm on the page for the agent, REVAPay_AI, and I'll just create a tweet here. I'll say, hey Reva, send. We'll just do one USDC on base to, and I'll tag Andre, who's our product designer, and that's it. So I just need to send that tweet, and the agent on the back end will basically realize that this is a transaction that has happened. It takes a minute sometimes to notify. It'll respond to me in the comments that the transaction has been successful. This is a transaction I did a little bit ago, but there you go. This is the new one. So yep, just sent one USDC to Dre. And so what happens is Andre has his own PayID connected to his Twitter account. And so the agent recognizes, oh, this user has a PayID. Let me send those, that one USDC to that agent. So yeah, super simple. And I think what's powerful with that is, making a payment becomes as easy as sending a message. And obviously, this is Twitter, and I did it in a public way. You can do it in DMs. And we're going to be integrating REVA AI to a bunch of different social media and messaging platforms. So you can imagine the same experience in WhatsApp, right? And that becomes super interesting because WhatsApp is the primary method of communication for people who are like doing remittances and sending money back to their families, right? And so imagine you've got someone in the U.S. who wants to send money to family back in Mexico, Colombia, or whatnot. They're texting with their family on WhatsApp, and they could just initiate a payment there. Hey, Reva, send $200 back to my mom or whatnot. And so that's I think that becomes really powerful as embedded payments take over, as AI takes over, to just be able to really have those transactions live where users already engage.
Right. How do you embed it in a WhatsApp chat? How does that work?
There are some technical elements to that, but basically you create an account for the agent, and WhatsApp has and I guess Meta in general for most of their messaging platforms has different developer tools that allow you to almost have like mini apps, if you will, that live in the messaging interface. So there's a lot. There's a lot there, and it obviously varies a little bit from platform to platform, but overall it's definitely beneficial for those platforms because users stick around more, right, and have more capabilities or more things they can do within those platforms. So most social media messaging platforms have the APIs to enable that.
Interesting. And you guys are launching a token as well, right? So what is the role of that?
Yeah, we're launching a REVA token related to the agent and our peer-to-peer payments application. And the reason for that is, and this is something I'm personally very excited about. It's, I believe, through a token, we have the opportunity to kind of redesign how a payment network really functions. Traditional payments networks, pretty much all the value is extracted by intermediaries, right? And that's just due to the flow of payments and an issuing bank and interchange and sort of all these different steps, right? When you have a payments network that's fully on chain, there really aren't many intermediaries, if any, right? Like, yes, if you're doing a cross-chain, cross-stablecoin transaction, then maybe you have an interoperability, protocol that becomes an intermediary and will take a small fee. But the variety of, or the majority, I should say, of the value that's created, you can really decide where you want that value to go because it's not extracted by so many different intermediaries. So what we're doing with the REVA token is building a payments network that rewards those who participate in it the most, right? And so as you refer friends into the network, you'll receive some tokens. As you transact, you'll get a percentage of like cash back in the token. And then by holding the token, you can unlock more functionalities. By holding the token, you get more cash back as well. And eventually all the revenue that's generated can go towards buybacks, which really means that people who are participating the most in the network and helping the network grow are actually getting most of the value because they have those tokens, and these tokens, the value of those tokens increases as buybacks happen. So I think that is a really interesting experiment within itself of building a new type of network where the users and the participants in it actually get a good chunk of the value that's created.
Mm. So when you look like more long term, is that what's your vision of that? How payments should feel? You kind of already mentioned agentic economy and stuff. I just wonder. This is I thought that was really cool in terms of the X way, the way to send on X that you just showed. But like, where do you see this going? down the line? What does it look like?
It's a good question. I think you mentioned intents earlier as primary as an infrastructure type of solution. I think of agents or AI in general as specifically agents as a sort of the ultimate intent like interface, right? Because when you're communicating with an agent, you're literally communicating your intent, especially when it comes to payments. Like, send Sohejl $20. That's the intent, right? I don't need to worry about what's happening on the background. I don't even need to like execute the transaction myself. I've just shared this intent, and the agent goes and executes. And so I think we're probably just going to get closer and closer to technology being able to execute on our intents and our desires, right? And I think that will be true for for payments as well as for a lot of different sectors. Now, what format that really sort of takes place in, I think that's still very much sort of a big question mark. Is it going to be text driven? Is it going to be voice driven? Maybe down the road it'll be thought driven. Like, who knows where this ends. But regardless of sort of how that interaction happens, I think it's really about coming as close as possible to the intention of the user.
Yeah, it's really exciting. Maybe we'll get to a point where I can express my intent and I don't have to hang around for 3 hours trying to trying to bridge those funds or whatever.
Totally. Totally. I mean, look, if it's already like a transaction that's bridging, funds from one network to another, Reveel already is bringing you a lot closer to that intent, and that happens much quicker.
Well, there you go. I think that's a really exciting intersection that you're working at. Curious to see it unfold. I mean, this was really interesting. Thank you for coming on the show. Is there anything else you'd like to say in terms of last words or pointing people to where they can try this stuff out, for example, or get involved?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if people are interested in exploring and sort of the future of payments, I definitely encourage them to check out what we're building, both with PayID, our universal stablecoin ID, which is being incorporated in a bunch of different applications, but also with the agent REVA AI. So people can find us. Reveel.id is our website, revapay.ai for the agent specifically. Or we're pretty active on Twitter as well. So that's r3vl_xyz. And for my part, you can pretty much find me Adrien Stern on most platforms.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adrien. That was a blast.
Well, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.